I think this is an item that is a multi-year, 6-8-year project. And hopefully I'll be back on the council when it comes back again. He has a little PowerPoint presentation. Why don't I let him do that, and then I'll make some final comments and open up to question.
What's easiest to try to do from here? Perfect. Okay, so this presentation is in the packets, and I also wanted to bring it here so that members of the audience can kind of understand what we're talking about. First of all, we're talking about the CRS district in downtown, which is the majority of the core of the downtown. In 1952, we became a city, and we had emergency zoning, called it the CR2 RS. In 1969, we got around to reviewing zoning, and it became the CRS district for the first time. 1988 was the first time that banks and other non-retail uses on the street level are no longer permitted uses within the CRS zone. So existing banks became legal non-conforming uses. New banks were no longer permitted. Whenever zoning change like this is made, I think the expectation is that there will be some rate of attrition going forward, that these properties will no longer, at some point in the future, will no longer have a bank operating out of them. What we've seen is in the last 24 years or so, we have not seen any attrition in banks in the CRS zone. So the CRS zone as it stands today, and this is out of our municipal code, the following uses shall be permitted in the CRS zone. Offices, and I've highlighted here Section B, offices located above the ground floor, and Section D, personal services, except when located in the ground floor building space that fronts directly onto First Street, Main Street, or State Street. So in the CRS zone, if your building frontage opens directly onto Main Street, for example, personal services are not permitted. So personal services could be interpreted as banking services. Similarly, the offices located in banks are part of what is not permitted on the ground floor on Main Street in the CRS zone. So what is the CRS zone? The CRS zone, this is pulled off of our, again, off the city website, our zoning, and I've got a little animation here that highlights it. It's just the light pink area in here is the CRS zone. So that's the core of the downtown, State Street, Main Street, from First Street to the intersection of State and Main. And the vision statement for the CRS zone, which is in our municipal code, is that the city shall retain and enhance the downtown Los Altos village atmosphere and shall seek to attract businesses to the village. So 2nd and Main Street, we have a couple of pictures here, and I took these before one of my office hours and was walking around downtown. So this is 2nd and Main Street is one example of an intersection in the downtown. There's desirable retail space. We have some of our national tenants actually operate out of 2nd and Main Street. There is a bank on the corner at 2nd and Main. And what Councilmember Packard and I have noted is that this bank is actually conforming in a 25-foot width on Main Street. This is different in both vibrancy and the design of the banks that are just down the street. A block away, we have 3rd and Main. We have two particular banks that have large windowless buildings, and they create an area that could be seen as dead space. Something that's somewhat understood in retail is that shoppers and pedestrians, even if they have a specific destination that they're going to, they're willing to walk about a quarter of a mile past shop windows to see what else they might have forgotten. So these banks create a natural stopping point for some of our shoppers in the downtown, where if they are going to Starbucks or if they're going to something in the peak activity area, which is right there, again highlighted in green at 2nd and Main, they're willing to walk a quarter of a mile, but as soon as they get to 3rd and Main, which is the black dot represented there, they're less likely potentially to continue on the loop around our downtown area. So the banks are creating a natural stopping point and potentially reducing the vitality or the pedestrian traffic that makes it all the way down the curve and the dogleg on Main Street. So we have been looking at options. What options do we have if attrition isn't going to settle the issue with the zoning? What else do we have in our toolbox? And one of the things that I became aware of when we were talking about digital signs and the sign ordinance was the idea of amortization. And so amortization assesses the financial impact to the tenant if they're required to close, and then determines an appropriate time frame for the amortization to reduce the financial impact. So this takes a look at what kind of impact would this have to these national bank tenants, and then in the scale of years, looks at how many years we would provide them with the ability to operate, continuing in the non-conforming before they are no longer permitted to operate as a bank. So that's our slideshow there.
Okay, now let me cover just a couple other things. We're really talking about two different types of things. The large banks, Citibank, Chase, and Bank of the West, they're non-conforming uses, but they're also non-conforming buildings, because the buildings are supposed to have every 25 feet a separate entrance. So they're both non-conforming uses and non-conforming buildings. U.S. Bank, which is, you saw the picture, the small one that's at 2nd and Main, that's a non-conforming use, but it's a conforming building. It could be easily converted to other retail. And now, the concept of, and we're not talking just about banks. Other non-conforming buildings, if you look at the Masonic Hall, that is an extremely non-conforming building. It's also a non-conforming use. Likewise, the Costume Bank building is both a non-conforming use and a non-conforming building. And of course, we have a whole slew of nail salons. Now, and one law firm that's on Main Street. Now, my first experience, I want to just take a moment, about 25 years ago, there's a very large property owner in Silicon Valley. And they approached me as an attorney because among their vast holdings was a little building in South Palo Alto where Fry's is currently located. They owned that building. And the city of Palo Alto was in the process of wanting to encourage housing. So they were in the process of applying an amortization schedule for that building to require, I think it was in 8 years, maybe in 6, that it could no longer be used for retail. It had to be used for housing. And so I was employed by the owner to see how to fight it. And it turned out it's very difficult to fight. And so that was my first exposure. Now, it turned out the city passed it, and then as the years went by, they got Fry's in as a tenant, and the people of Palo Alto love Fry's, and the city loves Fry's because they get so much sales tax that the city had the wisdom to reconsider their moratorium or their amortization schedule, and now it's retail permanently. So that's my first exposure to this. I don't have, and I don't think Jarrett does, an answer of should we actually pull the trigger on any of these? Should it apply to banks? Aren't some little banks, retail banking isn't what it used to be. Aren't some banks downtown helpful, even if they're on Main Street? Maybe they are. Do we want to really do something with the Masonic Hall or the or some of these nail salons? I don't know. I don't have an answer. But I do know that nothing will happen unless we do a study and look at it. This is the next step of an evolution of our downtown. We unfortunately have a limited space for retail. It's very limited. And how do we maximize that? And as a practical matter, Jared is right. Once you get down to Main and 3rd, it's dead. You don't see a lot of people walking past there because the retail experience is non-contiguous. So our proposal is we form this committee, and we report back to the council what we find and what we consider as options. Whatever we find, I know it's not, the trigger's not going to be pulled for years. And some future council may say phooey on the whole thing, or may say, thank goodness they had the foresight to do this. I'm open to any questions.
Mr. Cassidy?
Well, I just have two. One, did you both work together on this report?
Yes.
Okay.
He corrected my typos.
Okay. And then secondarily, you show one of the non-conforming buildings as well as uses being the Bank of the West, and the immediate property next to it is still vacant. Cars are parked on it. I know the landowner, when we chose to not allow them to continue their drive-in window or drive-up window, was not interested in having anything else put on that property. What do you envision utilizing in terms of your report specifically for a void?
I think, Dave, that what I hope is that we have the opportunity to actually speak to some of the property owners and the businesses. Now, in that instance, my understanding is the bank is willing to pay the rent on that and carry it as just a cost of doing business. So the owner is getting rent every month. The trustee for the two women in San Francisco are getting the rental checks, and they don't care. And the bank is just saying it's a cost of doing business. Now, if it turned out that in 6 or 8 years or whatever the period is, if they can no longer use it as a bank, then all of a sudden people's attention, I mean, they're not getting any checks. So at that point, I think they would be much more proactive. Right now, it's an irritant that they can't use that driveway, but it didn't stop the flow of rental checks.
So I have no requests to speak. Is there any other council discussion on this? Ms. Adderley?
A couple questions. So you're recommending a special project. Did you have a budget in mind?
I am assuming we'll come back with that, because I don't have a good enough sense yet.
Okay, because I want to know how much money and where's the money coming from.
It's coming from whatever project you want. I think it should come
Excellent.
from
I
the
have
sewer,
no project.
the
I
sewer
guess the budget's
fund.
zero.
The sewer plant fund. No, well, if you want a number, I'd say $20,000 to begin with.
Okay.
On the city attorney.
So yeah, the other thing is timing. So as we just went through, you're on 2 other committees that have some activity that is imminent.
I anticipate this to be wrapped up. I have we have a presentation to make to the Chamber of Commerce Board this Thursday morning, and then the Lava Board, I think Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning. If they can get to me, it's not fair to ask them to select a representative, because that assumes that they've come to a consensus. I don't think they're going to come to a consensus. We just want somebody that they have confidence in, that can be a conduit of information. So if they can get to us some names, I anticipate this to be about a 6-month process. It'll be done by the time I'm off the council. This isn't going to lay around.
Okay, and the other 2 committee assignments will also be done?
Well, those are minor. The dog committee